Friends and neighbors. We visited our neighbors in the country just like we had done in town. But in the country, we had to drive to our neighbors' houses. After an evening of talking and refreshments, we would head for the car slowly, and the neighbors would follow us. You didn't just let your friends walk to the car by themselves. And then someone had to say, "You all come back before the roads get bad." And of course, just like today, from the freezing and thawing, potholes appear and there's a lot of road repair that needs to be done. So remember that next time you're visiting your friends. Come back before the roads get bad. Be sure to say that. A not nice neighbor. One of our country neighbors had a son my age, and they brought him to our house to play with me. We were 4 and just beginning to learn the art of making friends. I decided to show him my teddy bear, Smokey. Big mistake. My new friend thought he'd impress me by ripping Smokey's eyes right off of his face. End of friendship. I cried out in anguish. Dr. Mommy came running and took him to the emergency room, her sewing area. The mean little kid had thrown Smokey's beautiful brown eyes as far as he could into a weed patch. We never found them. And even if we had, reattachment would not have been successful. I knew that he'd never see again. And the best thing that Dr. Mommy could do was to give him 2 light blue buttons for eyes. I hoped people wouldn't make fun of a brown bear with light blue eyes. Lassie. It only seemed right that a 40-acre farm would have a collie dog named Lassie. I only remember 2 things about her. Dad found a long black snake under one of our beds. It had likely crawled under our front door. We weren't into weatherproofing so much as we are today, so maybe the snake just wanted to come in and take a nap under one of our beds. Dad got it out on the end of a stick and took it to the front yard, calling for Lassie. Most dog owners would play fetch with their dogs with a ball or something. Dad and Lassie played snake. I'd like to think that he turned the harmless black snake loose in the garden to hunt rodents, but I can't really say. Lassie was supposed to be a watchdog on the farm to earn her keep. The neighbors next to us had pigs, and sometimes they would break out of their enclosure and find their way to our front yard and root up the grass. When we were home, Lassie always chased them away. One Sunday morning, we were at church, and the pigs must have seen us drive by in our Sunday best. They again broke out and came to our front yard to continue their previous work. They surely talked Lassie into some kind of live and let live arrangement, because when we were coming home, we could see our house, yard, neighbor pigs, and our guard dog just lying there doing nothing. We saw this from across the field. But when we turned into our lane, Lassie saw us. She jumped up, barking furiously, and chased the pigs away. Two flags. Our Deckard ancestors came to this country from Metz, France in 1775. Metz had been German, then French, then German, then French. so our people had lived under two flags. Back at the red brick farm, the Deckard kids were busy making flags on the dining room floor. We were working together in relative peace and quiet, but there was trouble brewing. The inscription on one flag was "For Sunrise," and on the other, "For Sunset." One family, but divided loyalties. The next day the mood was somber as we headed across the pasture, carefully avoiding landmines that had been planted by the Angus Resistance Movement, ARM for short. Another force to be reckoned with. We soldiers referred to these mines as cow pies. We entered a large barn and surveyed the interior. Two lofts, one on the west, one on the east. They were directly opposite each other and on the same level. Each loft had an ornamental iron ladder leading up to it. Each also had an ample supply of building materials with which to build a fort, hay bales. We planted our flags. This was to be a fair and final conflict. Make a choice. Do you like the sunrise or the sunset? The two eldest brothers headed up the ladder on the west side. The two youngest brothers and one sister climbed up the east. We spent the better part of the day building walls and tunnels and a prison for captured enemy soldiers. Also, we had a room in which to store ammunition, dried out corn cobs. Indiana's heat and humidity was taking a toll on the soldiers from both camps, and we called a truce to go back to the house for water and a trip to the outhouse. Then back to the battlefront. We were putting our finishing touches on our fortresses. We agreed there would be no weapons of mass destruction, only hand-launched devices, HLDs for short, corn cobs, dried out corn cobs. The fighting began on an agreed signal, and the HLDs, hand-launched devices, were flying from side to side. In one daring move, an enemy soldier from the sunset climbed up onto a beam that crossed over from one side to the other and rained down on us a bushel basket of devices. The fighting lasted all afternoon, but a truce was called when we heard the dinner bell. Some say that Israel's Six-Day War in 1967 was the shortest in history. Few have ever heard of the Great Loft War in 1957, which only lasted for one day. The shortness of this war was due mostly to the fact that both sides of the conflict had to sit down together and pray over their common meal 3 times a day. I think we understood that we had too much in common to continue our fight any longer. Thank you for joining me for part 3 of my adventure series. Tune in next Saturday for part 4. May God bless you, and let's hear it for sunrise.